From Screen to Shelf.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the From Screen to Shelf podcast, where we talk about physical media, entertainment, and pop culture, movies, Blu-rays, 4Ks, all that good stuff, theatrical releases, everything in between. Everything in between, from the silver screen to the palm of your hand. And today we're going to be talking about stuff in the palm of our hand, boutique labels. More specifically, some releases that we think are essential for someone to own. So if you're getting into boutique labels, if you started with studio discs only and now you're getting into boutique labels, which, I feel like nowadays it's becoming more of a thing for people that are getting into physical media, especially with the absence of places like Best Buy. Those kind of retailers are starting to disappear out of the picture. And I think eventually we're going to be living in a world where it's going to be either direct to consumer or via, places like Orbit DVD, Diabolic DVD, Atomic Video, places like that, Grindhouse Video, who specialize in, not only studio discs when they have them, but more specifically boutique labels. So we're gonna talk about some releases that we think are essential for somebody to own if you're just getting into boutique labels. What we think you should pick up or what we think you should seek out. Now, Chase, do you want to just preface this with what you were talking about before we rolled? Because we do want to specify there's not necessarily guidelines, but just certain things to keep in mind as you're listening or before we get into this discussion in regards to how we came to our selection. So we already did videos regarding our favorite 4K transfers, part 1, part 2, so on and so forth. This is most likely going to be one of more installments. Obviously, we both own a decent amount of movies. There's only so many that we can pick, due to the fact that there are time constraints. We can't sit here for 3 hours, 4 hours and talk about this kind of stuff as much as we'd like to.
Yeah.
So Chase, I don't know if you want to just get into the specifics of why we came to the conclusions that we did in regards to the picks that we have today to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. So to preface, we know that there's different types of hobbyists and collectors in our community. There's people that purely go for technical merit. There's people that go for the movies they love, they enjoy. They go for special features, this, and this. The way that we've approached this is what we see as the whole package, right? Now, not everything that we've picked might be reference quality. We didn't only seek out reference discs. Personally, I think that a lot of these are in that category, but to each their own. We all have different eyes, right? Some of the picks that we have lack special features, right? But we're trying to find the things that tick most, not all of the boxes, and what would be deemed one of the most well-rounded. It doesn't have to be the most completely well-rounded, but that's ideally what we're going for. And personally, what we think other people would enjoy, I think, is what we're going for in this one. Now, also to preface, we cannot go over, just like Will said, this episode, even as I started looking at all the discs right here, I was like, man, I'm at 3 hours right here. But we definitely, there's some very high priority ones that we unfortunately will not be able to get to talk to today. So just like Will said, expect another part to this where we're covering more boutique releases and studios that we are not going to be discussing today. But I think we have, 6 or 7? Yeah, maybe even 8.
I think amongst the two of us, we probably have anywhere from 6 to 8 of the boutique labels, which are, and there's a lot of them, folks. Like I said, we want to show everybody love because there are a lot of boutique labels out there that we're not going to mention today specifically that are still doing fantastic work. They're still putting in a lot of time and effort and hard work and long hours, making sure that they bring us the movies that have been either hard to find or have existed on other formats, but just haven't been to the standard that people want it to be. So that's the best thing about the current age, I guess we can say, of physical media that we live in is that there are a lot of labels out there that are trying to put out stuff that we're probably not going to talk about today. But
Yeah.
as we get more in depth, we figure we start off kind of dipping our toe in the water, talking about releases that, although they may not be considered mainstream in regards to something that major studios would put out, they're still releases that we think are pretty well known and pretty sought after to a degree, right?
Yeah.
Where if you were to mention this, on Discord or on Reddit or whatever community you're a part of, be it online or whatnot, you'd get people would know what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
we're not going too obscure with this.
Yeah, I think
Yet,
we hit. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but because there's and I'll shout out some other labels. There's stuff like Error 444
Mhm.
that's relatively new. They're doing a lot of interesting stuff with a lot of like the category 3
Mhm.
Hong Kong cinema, of the late 80s and 90s. That is stuff that's obviously not that doesn't appeal to everybody. They're a
Right.
fantastic label. I think they're doing great work. So shout out to Era 444 before we get into this other discussion. But I just want to point out labels like that we won't necessarily be talking about today in regards to any particular release. But my dehumidifier is going because dude, it's been so humid here. It's at
It's
the
all
brim
good.
finally. Yeah, I got to drain it later. But yeah, there's a lot of labels that we're not going to get to talk about today. So we figured we'd start with the big ones, the ones that everybody's probably aware of. If you've been online or on forums or on Discord, you know what's going on. And for people that are watching this or listening to this that are more casual, viewers or you're more of a casual physical media collector, so to speak, if there is such a thing. I don't know if that's
Right.
even that's like a weird
It's
like
a
word
bygone
salad right
era.
there. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
casual physical media collector. I don't know if that's such a thing, but if you're just someone who doesn't buy movies as frequently, if you're somebody that pretty much just sticks to big releases, but you're thinking about dipping your toe into more
Mhm.
boutique releases and some things that have piqued your interest, then yeah, maybe some of the titles we're going to talk about today will sway you over to the dark side of constantly having no money
Yeah.
and being
Right.
broke like me. Chase, I don't know if you want to get started. Do we want to start by label? We want to start with Arrow, maybe, because Arrow, I
That's what I was
think,
thinking.
is
Arrow.
one of the biggest labels out there in regards to a boutique label. Arrow,
Yeah.
we speak of them a lot on this channel. We talk about them all the time and about how they're consistently doing, 9 times out of 10, they do fantastic work.
Yeah.
Their bonus features are incredible. They put a lot of work into their releases, especially their LE releases. They do a lot of good work with those. So, yeah, let's start off with Arrow, and I think we each picked one movie, so to speak. And again, hopefully there's not any overlap. If there is, so be it.
Yeah.
But we each tried to grab titles that we thought were unique, not only to the parameters that Chase discussed moments ago, but also movies that we personally like. It's
Yeah.
not just something that you just need to have it for the sake of having it. We
Having, yeah.
think that these movies at the end of the day, uh, they do have entertainment value. They're quality films to a degree. So yeah, these picks are
Yeah.
these are legit picks right here that you're about to hear. So Chase, yeah, why don't you kick us off and talk about your first pick?
Yeah. And another thing, I just playing it back in my head, I was thinking about this. Another thing I took into consideration is the financial ability and how easy it is to get, right?
Okay.
Because I easily could have picked the American Psycho set, but that's not financially easy or feasible to
Right.
get. They do have that
Right.
new edition out, and I still think it's a lot of bang for your buck, but not everybody's going to want 4 movies, right? Just because I love them.
Exactly.
So the first one, I actually have 2 picks, and the first one's because we've already, I think we bring this movie up every other episode at least. Like,
Yeah.
if this is your first time tuning in, that's why I went ahead and still grabbed it and didn't leave it on the shelf. But that's going to be Arrow's U.S. release of RoboCop, and this right here I have is the LE with the booklet, the Amaray, everything right here for our video viewers. It's peak transfer. It's reference quality in its own category for what it's trying to go for, and staying true as a true homage and being faithful to the disc and what was presented at the time, while not trying to make it look too clean or removing any elements. RoboCop is personally one of my favorite movies of all time, so of course I'm always going to want to shout this out. It comes with a really cool poster and some cards. It has a decent amount of special features as well. You really, really can't go wrong with RoboCop in any way, shape, or form, and you can religiously get it on sale for pretty cheap. I'm pretty sure Barnes and Noble $25 during their Arrow sales for the standard, and I think you can still get the Steelbook. And I think that's a pretty good deal for what you get. You get a good amount of special features. I want to say it's over 10 different special features. It's got a lot. And especially if you are able to get a hold of the LE, which I think that's kind of getting over that line that I just drew a few minutes ago. You do get a really cool book that does dissect a lot about the movie, how they restored it and everything like that. So I wanted to go ahead and shout out, but not spend too much time on RoboCop. But I wanted to go ahead and get that one out of the way. So
Nice.
what my actual first pick would be, outside of that, would actually be a movie that is, again, one of my favorite movies ever. It's not necessarily for everybody. If you like sci-fi, I also kind of like to describe or compare this movie to WALL-E a little bit. It's not WALL-E, but it kind of has the same elements about humanity, it falling, preserving humanity at the same time, the journey and the trek to preserving that. And that's going to be Silent Running, which I don't see this one get talked about a lot. I know the movie is relatively known for sci-fi enthusiasts, but I know it's not necessarily held up on a pedestal that I tend to hold it up on. I find it super fun. It looks amazing. I got the one with the Steelbook in it. I love it. I love just taking it off the shelf and looking at it. It's a genuine art on my shelf. But yeah, so essentially for people that are curious, if somebody hasn't seen this movie, I'm pretty sure you can stream it on Tubi. This seems like a Tubi type of movie. But it's essentially about being on the ship, and all green life has died on Earth, and there's only one. Was it a botany? Is it botanist? That's who studies plant life. I'm pretty sure.
Botanist. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a botanist on a ship that's responsible for taking care of the last green that has been taken from Earth. And then things start going wrong and he has to protect it. I find it super fun. I find the acting great. I find the story to be super fun. I think it's just super charming, and it's a super big product of its era. And everything about it, like, again, it's just like RoboCop. I hold it up there with Barbarella, actually a little bit above. It's just so faithful to everything that it's trying to preserve, be, and do. And so that's why I went and chose Silent Running right up there with RoboCop. I just don't see it getting talked about enough. And it's super, like, you can still get it on their website. Super easy to get.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate that movie too. And like you said, it's such a product of its time, but there's movies from that era that I love so much. And that's probably, I mean, I don't know if it's around the same time as movies like some of the Charlton Heston movies like the Omega Man and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just has that certain look, man. It's just got like a 70s aesthetic to it, even though it's set on a space station, it's just, I don't know, such a great performance from Bruce Dern. I think he's fantastic in that as the botanist. I forget his character's name in the movie.
Yeah, so do I.
But he gives a great performance. Just I don't know, just a unique type of movie for that genre, right? So yeah, fantastic movie. And it's one of those releases that I think did kind of fly under the radar. I don't remember hearing a lot of buzz about it when it came out, at least on Discord or on our community. But yeah, something that I think is overlooked here and there, but something that people should definitely check out for sure.
Yeah, and I agree. And one absolute last bit of information I'll read in the back while you were talking, Will, how we describe the movie is like, that doesn't sound that good. But to let you know how this movie stands on its own and how it stands the test of time, this movie is by the visual effects coordinator for 2001: A Space Odyssey, Douglas Trumbull. 4 years after, 1972. So if you think you're in for some good cinematography and camera work and some special effects, look no further than Silent Running. It's really
the movie good. Does, and that's the thing too. It feels like a smaller budget movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the visuals and the effects in it are actually pretty well done. So, and again, I don't know what the budget was at the time, but they were able to do a lot with seemingly a little. Because again, I think for a movie of it, if of its caliber, it definitely stands out to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's super, super fun, super good. I can't shout that movie out enough. But what was your Arrow pick?
So I went with something that is probably a little more recognizable. It's a movie that I love. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think it's a unique movie in the sense that it's. I'll say this: it's from one of my favorite directors of that era, and it came out at a time in the early '90s when, like, a lot of movies of that time were really kind of pushing boundaries in regards to violence on screen, right? And my pick is something that I think kind of encapsulates that, but at the same time also encapsulates really that kind of pop culture. I guess we could say resurgence, so to speak, with these kinds of films, and people will know exactly what I mean when I reveal this. But the movie is True Romance.
Oh
Um,
man, I
and
am
it's
ashamed
the
to say I have not opened my copy yet.
Oh man, dude, you got to watch. If you haven't seen the, I
uh,
hope you've seen the movie, but you got to check this out, dude. This is the
yeah,
LE Steelbook, which
yeah,
is
I have
it's
that one.
interesting because they don't do a lot of these LEs with the Steelbooks in them. This thing's heavy, dude. This thing's got some weight to it, obviously being a Steelbook in there. But I'll talk about the movie a little bit first before I get into why I think the release is important. But as far as the movie's concerned, it's such a unique movie to me because when I saw it, I was like, this feels like Tarantino, but
Hmm.
there's something different about it, but it's Tarantino style, and it's so interesting that, Tarantino is credited as a writer on this. He wrote the screenplay and Tony Scott directed this movie. And I love Tony Scott. I think Tony
Yeah,
Scott is one of those directors that was, I mean, he definitely received a lot of criticism for a lot of his movies being style over substance and highly stylized. But I just think Tony Scott is one of those guys like, Days of Thunder, movies like that. I mean, Top Gun, obviously. He's just made so many movies that I enjoy, but I think True Romance is probably one of his best movies that he's ever done.
yeah,
Uh, and I just think the cast of characters in this movie is so unique. It's so wild. Like from Christopher Walken as kind of the mob boss to obviously you got Christian Slater's character and Patricia Arquette, and they're fantastic together. Their chemistry, I think, is really, they got some pretty solid chemistry. And I mean, Gary Oldman as Drexel, the pimp. I mean, it's just his performance was amazing. Like
yeah,
just one of those guys that when I always see him in movies and I said, dude, how the fuck, like that's fucking Gary Oldman. He's
yeah,
just so far removed from how he is in real life in this performance particularly. Um, it's just so convincing. I mean, you just love every character that inhabits the world of this movie. And it's pretty much like a Bonnie and Clyde story, set in modern day, which in this case is, in the 90s. And it's got that Tarantino flair to it. There's kind of an emotional, not that the movie's not emotional, but it's more of like a playful, emotional immaturity, so to speak. Like it's definitely more stylized, a more stylistic approach to emotional interaction between characters than you would see in like a normal drama.
yeah,
This being obviously a genre film and kind of it's pretty much like a neo noir in some regards, but it's also, it's a crime film. I wouldn't necessarily call it an action film, but there's romance in it as well. Yeah, I just think it's just an awesome genre movie, dude. And to have Tony Scott direct something that Tarantino wrote, uh, it was just a treat, dude, for me. Once again, I'm a fan of Tarantino, but I wish that he would write more movies for other
yeah,
people.
yeah.
And when
Let
I
them
watch
interpret
this
his
kind of
story.
movie, it always takes me back to that thought. Obviously, Natural Born Killers was another experiment with that with Oliver Stone. And obviously, the tale is that Tarantino and Stone had disagreements over how that movie ended up being, the final product. Oliver Stone had a different vision than Tarantino did. And they supposedly famously fought at one of those Hollywood parties after the movie's release because Tarantino hated Natural Born Killers so much. But Tarantino has gone on record to say that he loved True Romance. He loved Tony
Oh, wow.
Scott's approach to True Romance. But getting back to what I was saying, it's one of those movies when I watch it, and I wish Tarantino would write more screenplays for other directors.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be very interesting to see. But yeah, True Romance, as far as the release itself is concerned, guys, I don't know if this LE is still available for a reasonable price. I'm pretty sure you can pick up the standard edition, probably on Amazon for, I don't know, anywhere from $20 to $25 new. But I just think this movie is essential. I mean, if you're a fan of 90s movies, you're a fan of Tony Scott, it's Tony Scott with Tarantino as the writer. I mean, you can't really go wrong with this, but it's just an awesome movie. I just think there's an all-star cast with so much incredible performances. And the extras on this are pretty stacked as usual with Arrow releases, but it comes with the steelbook. You get the lobby cards inside. There's a little sticker in there. And your extras, you have your commentaries. I think there's some commentary by I don't know if they have any by Tony Scott. I'm pretty sure they do, and some stuff from Tarantino on there as well. And then you also have your production booklet in there. But again, in my opinion, as far as Arrow releases are concerned, if you don't want to go too far into the more obscure movies, I think True Romance is a pretty close to mainstream as you could get from a boutique release like Arrow. And obviously there's some other films that we'll get to, if not this episode, in later episodes that have more of that mainstream appeal. But I think True Romance is a good starting point for that. So that was my pick.
Yeah, fantastic pick. And I hate to disappoint you. I will defend myself. I have a themed month coming up, so I will be watching it, but I have never
Yeah.
seen the movie. I
No
have never
worries, dude.
seen it.
I hope that you enjoy it, dude. I have a feeling that you will. I think you
Yeah.
will. I don't know if you'll enjoy it as much as I do. It's just one of my favorite movies because I think it's one of those movies for me, though, that's more of a comfort movie for me for some reason.
Fair
It's
enough.
like Big Trouble in Little China. I just grew
Yeah.
up with it, and I've seen it so many times now that I don't care. Like if I'm having a shitty day or I'm just in a bad mood, I can pop one of those movies in and I just feel okay.
So much better. That's how I feel with Dr. Caligari and Fury Road.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoy, but I think you'll get a kick out of how wild like Gary Oldman's performance is. I mean, that's in the first chapter of the film. That's a real first. I guess we could say first third of the movie. That's what really kind of took me by surprise, And that's the cool thing about it is that Tarantino writes those characters so well, and then you have Tony Scott's approach to directing. I don't know. There's just some really fucking cool moments in this movie, and it's not like there's moments where it's a little bit over the top, where you can definitely see that Tarantino influence. But I just think that Tarantino's writing style complements Scott's directing style so well, and that's why I think this works. Whereas Natural Born Killers didn't necessarily work for a lot of people with
Right.
Oliver Stone directing it. So, but that's pretty much what I'll say about it for now. But yeah, that's my pick. So definitely check out True Romance from Arrow. Like I said, that standard is probably available. I think the last time I saw it was like anywhere from $20 to $25 or like 23 and change or something like that on Amazon. So
pretty digestible,
pretty reasonable price.
Yeah, especially you can probably. I want to say those just went out of print. They could still be circulating because I know people were getting those from the last Barnes and Noble sale still. They produce a lot of those ones, but yeah, definitely a very, very solid pick on that one, Will. I think the next one, I think I'll do this one in order of popularity. So I think I'll go with Kino next.
Okay.
So I will kind of voice, this is kind of one of those things, like as much as I adore Kino for what they put out a lot more volume to a degree. They release at least, I feel like 4Ks a month is a lot. They're hard to keep up with. So there's definitely some that I just don't have. And there's a lot of them I do have. I do feel like personally a little bit here and there, they lack the special features department that we've kind of gotten spoiled with, like places like Second Sight, Arrow, and sometimes Scream Shout Factory. They're kind of in that same ballpark when it comes to their special features.
Mm-hmm.
But without further ado, this movie is actually by my favorite director of all time. I consider it to be one of the best mob movies of all time.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd put it up there with The Godfather. I maybe would put it up there with Scarface, maybe even above. I think it's just it's a better package if you haven't seen it, but that's definitely going to be Eastern Promises by
Yeah.
Kino Lorber, and I'm gonna take this moment to start a public outcry for A History of Violence, because that's yet another mob movie that I consider that to be one of the greatest mob movies of all time. But this one
Yeah.
goes that extra mile. A History of Violence is different. So if you haven't seen Eastern Promises, it's essentially about two people that are trying to that essentially are pretty established, but they're trying to work themselves out and in and up. It's a pretty, it's not, I wouldn't say convoluted, but it's a very complex story about how they're trying to navigate the inner gang workings and mafia and mob ties.
Yeah.
And it's very, very goofy. And it even has some very, very funny moments in it that it just kind of breaks the seriousness. But this is the movie that made me a massive fan of Viggo Mortensen. I think he was absolutely phenomenal. And then as I went through more Cronenberg and the way that he collaborates with Cronenberg, especially in like A History of Violence, in Crimes of the
Yeah.
Future and stuff like that, he's just phenomenal all the way around. He gives an excellent performance. I believe this is a 5.1 audio track. So the audio, it is a 5.1 audio track. So the audio was super crisp, super clean. The transfer was better than what you'd expect out of a digitally shot film. And I had a good time with it. The only thing I'd say, and you can get this one for sub 20 all the time. And that's why I think for digestibility, this one is very, very mainstream. A lot of people can stomach it if you like that little bit more violent approach, that
Yeah.
more R-rated, that hard R rating. But it's definitely super digestible, very light on the special features. But I think that this is like the pinnacle for what Kino does whenever it comes to restoring more modern movies, especially.
Yeah.
Naomi Watts' character is great. I forget the
Mhm.
other Russian guy's name. That is it Vincent Cassel?
Are you?
He's good.
So I want to say it's Vince. Is it Vincent Cassell? I think it
Does
is.
Vincent, is he the dad or like the leader?
No, he's the.
The other guy.
There's the older gentleman that's with them, and I forget his name. The older gentleman that always like he's wearing the suit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it might be Vincent Cassell. I'm not sure. Let me pull that up real quick.
Yeah, and it's definitely top 5 Cronenberg. It's an
Yeah.
S tier Cronenberg for me. Is it? It's not.
Joseph Alton.
He's the other guy that's moving up and trying to navigate. Joseph Olsen.
Joseph Alton. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but
Okay.
he looks very similar to Vincent Cassell.
Oh, does he?
Yes.
Because he's his son, as far as I'm aware, and that's essentially where a lot of the ties. And the movie is very complex. You take your eyes away from it for a half second, you miss like a very, very big piece of dialogue. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily Godfather intense, where it's like, oh, bathroom break, and it's still running, and then you just missed a whole time jump,
Right.
But it's still definitely something you want to pay very intense attention to. But yeah, that's gonna be my Kino Lorber pick. I had a lot of fun with that movie. I'm gonna use any moment I can to shout out Cronenberg. Maybe another title. I had a really, really, really good time with Kindergarten Cop. That one was really, really good.
Yeah, Kindergarten Cop was fun.
That one was really good, and I know that's a classic to a lot of generations out there. So
Yeah.
I would probably even throw that out there. Fantastic work again. They now again, to preface for people that are maybe foraying, a lot of these ones, whenever you see the Paramount logos on there, about
Yeah.
half the time Kino Lorber restores these in-house, and the other half of the time they are actually given the restoration by Paramount for the Paramount
Yeah.
licensing that they have, because they have the biggest deal with Paramount out of any company. I'm pretty sure they do with MGM as well.
Yeah, they have MGM titles as well. I mean, in fact, the movie that I picked that I'm going to talk about after this is an MGM title. So it's
Yeah.
Paramount and MGM. I think they have the biggest. I don't know about MGM, but I know Paramount. I'm pretty sure they have the biggest distribution deal so far, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, and somebody please correct me or will correct me. I want to say they have hundreds of titles through Paramount that are in the pipeline. Like when they announced it, it was a huge deal. Like we're not talking about like, oh, maybe 40, 50 movie. I swear they've probably released at least 40 or 50 movies since they announced that partnership a year ago through Paramount. Like they've just been going crazy with it. But yeah, that's going to be my pick. What's your MGM title, Will?
I do want to say real quick about Eastern Promises. It is a really good movie. I think, and you were talking about the violence in it. I was going to say, like, it's definitely violent, but I mean, from what I remember, the violence only takes up like just a short amount of screen time. Like those violent scenes are not very long,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, they're horrible to watch.
Yeah,
You know,
they're harsh. It's Cronenberg.
they're harsh. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. And it's interesting because this movie, I guess, it's been criticized a lot, but it's also been kind of given some accolades for how it addresses, violence. And there's also, I mean, there's sex trafficking,
Mhm.
in this film as well, which is, a real world issue that's, obviously heartbreaking and
Yeah.
something that is, it's just a horrible fucking thing, but
Yeah.
I think Cronenberg approaches the subject matter in a way that's digestible, but at the same time, it really affects you. It really hits you. I think it's a really well done movie. So, I'll hop on that, on the Cronenberg train with you for that one
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, my pick is something, also a movie that's very violent, also a director that is one of my favorite directors. The late William Friedkin, rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
In my opinion, one of the most, somebody that I just look up to so much for just not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
up until the end, he just didn't. And that's the thing, man. Like, I don't know. It's just so inspiring, him, just to listen to some of his interviews, and he just stands his ground always. And,
Mhm.
if he thinks something stupid, he'll say it. And that, I mean, that's how he was. And I think his movies were just that. It's just as uncompromising as they could be. But I think one of the most awaited movies from Kino, that was talked about for some time. There were rumors for a while as to whether or not this was eventually going to come to fruition. It was like an on and off thing, and then they were trying to figure out what was going on with Friedkin, like what was going on with him. But this movie was, I think, one of the most anticipated releases that Kino had put out. And when it finally came out, it was so worth it. In my opinion, I think the transfer is fantastic. I mean, albeit not perfect, but a really, really good transfer of a fantastic movie, one of his best, and that is To Live and Die in L.A.
Hell yeah.
This is a movie that, again, it is incredibly bleak. A very bleak movie, about the consequences that people have to face for the actions that they choose to do, and the life that they choose, I guess we can say. Um, yeah, I'll get into the movie a little bit here without kind of spoiling anything. I mean, this is a neo-noir crime film. I mean, I guess we could call it a thriller as well. It's based on a novel by, I think the guy was a former Secret Service agent. Let me just pull up the name real quick because I don't remember the novelist's name. I think he was a former Secret Service agent, for the U.S. government. Um, I can't find the guy's name. It is based on a novel from the 80s. But essentially, oh, here it is. Gerald Pedovich, who apparently he co-wrote the screenplay with,
Oh, wow.
with Friedkin. So William Peterson, who's a fantastic, fantastic actor, and a shout out to William Peterson. I want to point out another movie real quick. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but another movie that William Patterson stars in that I fucking love is Manhunter.
Oh,
So
yeah,
anybody
yeah.
that hasn't seen Manhunter, please
Mm.
check that movie out. That is a fantastic movie,
Yeah,
with
great movie.
William Peterson. So check that out. Manhunter, excellent, excellent crime film. In fact, he had a fucking run in the late 80s, early 90s, dude. Because he
Mhm.
was in To Live and Die in LA. I think that was like 85, this movie. And then Manhunter came out a year before or a year after that. And then he also starred in a sequel to a movie that I reviewed on this channel, that had a more recent 4K release called Young Guns, but he starred in the sequel, Young Guns 2.
Oh,
I
wow.
think that was probably like around the turn of the 90s. So William Peterson, he had a little bit of a run there in the late 80s, early 90s, some really good string of movies. But getting back to this film, I think it's one of William Friedkin's best movies. I love the way that this movie is shot. Like the colors on this transfer, like the neons, they just pop so well. It's just such a beautiful film to watch. It's very violent. There's some scenes that are extremely bloody. One in particular that I'm not going to spoil it. I don't want to get into spoiler territory here, but not only is it shocking because kind of you just kind of it just throws you off guard how quickly it happens. And it's just, yeah, man, it's just it's such a bleak film,
Yeah.
such a bleak film. But Willem Dafoe's character is also just so convincing,
Yeah.
you know. Fantastic movie. For a crime movie of that time too, it's one that stands out because he has such a unique style and a unique approach to the subject matter. But as far as the bonus features, I mean, I'm not going to get into it. It's there's not much. I mean, they have some special features. There's an interview with William Peterson. They got an interview with one of the actresses, Deborah Fruer, I believe, which is taken from the Blu-ray. A lot of these are Blu-ray extras that were ported over. So, there's an interview with the stunt coordinator. There's some deleted scenes. But other than that, like you said, Kino, the thing with Kino is they're not super consistent.
Yeah.
In regards to, well, I shouldn't say that. They're consistent in regards to what to expect from them. They
Right.
put out a lot of releases. They're steady with their releases. Like you said, they do like at least 2 or 3 4Ks a month, I think.
Yeah.
Which is more than most labels.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I try to get a lot of these on sale, but this was day one for me. I pre-ordered this because I had to buy this day one so I could watch it. But yeah, I mean, it's William Peterson. I forgot to mention the story. He pretty much works as a Secret Service agent in LA, and he follows cases that revolve around counterfeiting operations, like counterfeiting and money laundering and stuff like that. And he's got this, from what I remember, it's a partner of his that's involved with some bad people that's going to get him involved into it's just dragging him down that road where it just gets very corrupt and very dirty and very dangerous. He's also having this weird relationship with this woman who he's a parole officer for, and he's pretty much using her for like sex, which is, again, it's really fucked up, dude. Like, this is the thing I love about some of Friedkin's work is that these people are not people that you want to root for.
Right.
Because they're, the duality of his personality is very present here. Like, he's somebody who's dedicated to his job. He's focused. He wants to fucking get these guys that are involved in this counterfeiting operation, but at the same time, like, he himself is by no means a perfect person.
Yeah.
And Friedkin just has a way of conveying that so well in his movies, especially in this film, though. I think, again, as far as a noir film is concerned, a neo-noir film from that time period, I don't know if it gets any better than To Live and Die in L.A. So an excellent release by Kino Lorber. And again, one that has been highly, not so much sought after now because it's out, but before its release, people were asking for this time and time and time again. I remember reading constant messaging boards like, when is To Live and Die in LA coming out? What's going on with the transfer? Have they done it yet? Has Friedkin approved the master, like the work or whatnot? So, and he worked very closely with Kino on this supposedly. So, yeah, To Live and Die in LA. Check it out. My pick.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's a movie I missed out on this go around. I've seen it. It's been so long, but I have seen that one. But yeah, I definitely need to pick that one up. That one's a very, very solid pick. A lot of great things to say about it.
Yeah.
I think the one right after that, it would be a safe assumption to talk about Scream/Shout for what we had picked up.
Sure.
I did the same thing as I did with Arrow. I've talked about this one every chance I get. It's one of my favorite horror movies, top 5. Possibly even. I'm so happy that there's people out there that love this movie as much as I do. I think that this is a pinnacle of what you should do whenever you properly restore a classic, or now considered a cult classic, horror movie from the 80s, 90s. And I went with, on the Scream side of things, I went with Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. I consider it to be one of the best transfers out there. I consider it to be really the whole package. It doesn't have, it actually has a decent amount. This is one of those Scream releases that does have a decent amount of extras on it.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Halloween 3, I'm sure. How do you describe this one? So it's no Michael Myers. That's what it's notorious for, and it got written
Yep.
off super quickly for not having Michael Myers in it. But I think that's the point of it, because that was what John Carpenter's original vision was to have it be an anthology series, right? So they went
Yes.
ahead and tried that with it, and they hit it out of the freaking park with this one so well. And it sucks. I mean, I think it made money at the box office when it came out. It just wasn't what they wanted, right?
Yeah.
And it was
It
overwhelming.
had a lot of
feedback was
competition too.
Yeah,
at the
it did.
time.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that. I mean, it was that movie I think we talked about in The Thing. I don't know which
Yes.
episode it was that we did, but we did a movie, or excuse me, we did an episode where we talked about movies that had dealt with some of that
Yeah.
back in that time period in the early 80s. There was just so many movies coming out,
Mhm.
and it was, you know, it was just bad timing in regards to release, you know, and not having Michael Myers in it obviously affected that as well, but it was also what it was up against at the box office at the time,
Yeah.
you know.
And especially when you had longer theatrical windows, it's not like now where a movie can make
Right.
its a majority of its money in 2 or 3 weeks and then fall out, go out on
Yeah.
video on demand, which, I mean, we've talked about that recently, so not to beat a dead horse. But
Right.
yeah, Halloween 3, it looks good, the masks pop, the color grading's amazing. I believe this is actually one of their few Atmos. No, this one doesn't. The first 2 have Atmos. This one has a DTS HD.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
the DTS. 1 and 2 have Atmos. I mean, yeah, dude,
Yeah.
I'll piggyback on that, dude. Halloween 3, I think, has become probably my second or third favorite Halloween
So
movie,
good.
after the original. I mean, I still love 2 because for 2, for me, there's just so much nostalgia with that, you know, growing up watching, what was it, like AMC Fear Fest or whatever
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
or like the 15 days of Halloween or whatever AMC did every year. You know, we used to watch all those movies on TV. And I told you before, you know, I had seen Halloween when I was young. Even before that, I was really young when I had seen
Yeah.
Halloween, and Michael scared the shit out of me. But when I saw Halloween 3, uh, it really fucked with me because
It's
like
terrifying.
it just the whole premise of that movie is
It's
insane,
terrifying.
insanely
Yeah.
horrifying. Like just killing
Yeah.
children, like that's fucking, it's brutal, dude. Like
Yeah.
it's actually, I think, just a genius film in many regards, and I think it's grown on a lot of people. So yeah, as far as boutique releases are concerned, if you're looking for a really good horror movie that's just different from everything else in that franchise,
Mhm.
I think Halloween 3, it's the one movie out of, like, in terms of franchises, the Halloween franchise with Halloween 3, that's the one movie that's so far removed from everything else in the franchise.
Yeah. So you
You
can
know,
watch
correct me
just
if I'm
that.
wrong. Maybe there's,
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the franchises in horror. I think Halloween 3
Yeah.
is an
That may be a good
example of a
assumption.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a film within its franchise that is so different from everything else in that
Yeah.
franchise. I mean, the main thing being that Michael's not in it. Well, technically he is for a brief moment, but
Yeah.
you know, it's supposed to be an alternate timeline or reality, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But yeah, Halloween 3 is awesome. That transfer is actually really good. Yeah, and for those of you, to Chase, if I may, like, we're talking
Go
about
for it.
Halloween 3, but I believe that they did Halloween 1 through 5,
Yeah.
all
In that
available.
batch.
I don't know if any of those special slip covers are still available. They may be. I don't know if you
Sometimes.
have the special slip.
Yeah. I bought all of these day one. The full
Yeah,
slip
same
editions.
here. So I got the full slip editions like you have as well, of 1 through 5. I stayed away from that other set that they came out with where it was like, what was it? It was
The
6,
Miramax set.
20, and
Yeah.
Resurrection. I didn't buy that one, but for those of you that are looking to get all the Halloween films, they are all available, at least by now, on standard edition, from Scream Factory. So, and all those releases are pretty good. So, and they're
They are.
consistent too with the artwork. Not everybody's a fan of, like, some people call it the leaf blower artwork.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the
I
leaves
like
on the
it.
covers.
It's nice.
It's all right, man. It's cool,
Yeah.
you know, for what it is. I mean, I'm a big Halloween guy, so I bought it anyway, regardless. But yeah, Halloween 3, dude, shout out. Fantastic movie. Great pick.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I wanted to use this time also for people that may not want to watch horror. If you want to go to the more tame shout side of things, I didn't grab it, but there's 2 picks I'd give, and I'll just shout out the second one super quick, and that would be Clue. I recently got that off online sale that they had where things were like 15, 18, 20 bucks, and had a blast with it. Never saw that movie before. Fantastic restoration. But the first thing I'd
Nice.
recommend, if you could get your hand on anything Shout related, it is Weird, the Al Yankovic story.
Yeah.
I have the Steelbook here, but it is available in Standard and Umbrella Entertainment, which, again, another boutique label that we won't be talking about today. But want to go ahead and give them their few seconds of time. Did a release of Weird as well. That right there is fun for the whole family. That movie, have you seen it, Will?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so goofy. It doesn't take itself seriously. To sell you on the idea of it, basically, Weird Al is known as a parody artist, right? So whenever he went to go have a biography made about him or a biopic made about him, why don't I make a parody biopic? He had to extend that out. So that's what
so
you get.
funny.
This is just a goofy cornball parody biopic movie that is just so pleasant. I watched it back to back. I watched it for the first time. I blind bought it. I was like, I know I'm going to love it. I love Daniel Radcliffe because after Harry Potter, he selects the weirdest roles, man. Like, much respect to him. Guns Akimbo, Swiss Army Man. This movie, like, he is just a talented individual, and he just gets he's riding off that Harry Potter money until the day he dies. And
Most likely, yeah.
And so, shout out Weird. It hasn't, I believe it's 5.1. I don't think it is Dolby Atmos. Yep. And that soundtrack is great. You will be in stitches laughing. Your whole family can watch this. That is a movie. I don't think I've seen it on a good sale so far because it is a newer title. I think it came out in November of last year. Scream is not, whenever you see a lot of sales, the first time they had a great sell, for those that are curious, was actually just about a month ago. They had a lot of their titles around 15 to 20 bucks. Usually on sale for them is like $4 off, and they're already 32 bucks. So you're still spending 28 and you're like, okay, well, I just hope my friend wants to sell me a copy at one point,
Yeah.
Tell your friend to purchase something. Hopefully you can buy it from a secondhand. But yeah, Weird, the Al Yankovic story, absolutely stellar. If you want to know any more about that, go over to the From Screen to Shelf YouTube channel. I did a full-length review where I talk about everything. I watched all the special features. That's why I didn't want to spend too much time on that. Go check out that video. And you can know, I think it's like 14 minutes long. I just loved it. So gleeful. That movie's so fucking fun. Oh, I love it. It's just so good.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, check that video out, guys. If you're interested in that, Chase has that review up. That is available on the channel to check out. I'm not going to go on too long about my pick because it's a pretty well-known movie, at least within the horror community. This is considered to be probably one of the most all-around, well-received horror remakes as far as audiences are concerned, as far as audience reception is concerned. And that is the 2013 remake of Evil Dead by Fede Alvarez, our boy, who is releasing Alien Romulus this coming August, just a couple months away, folks. So, stay tuned for that. We have high hopes for that movie. We think that's going to do well. But getting back to Evil Dead, his foray into remaking, and he's done some really other cool movies. Don't Breathe,
very fun,
another well-known
very film. Uneasy, that movie,
very uneasy film.
Yeah.
But as far as Evil Dead is concerned, one of my favorite Shout / Scream Factory releases, I think they did a fantastic job with this transfer.
Yeah.
I think the audio track, although it isn't Dolby Atmos, it is DTS HD 5.1.
Yeah.
Still sounds really amazing.
Yeah.
Dude, the colors in this movie, I mean, just
the rain.
I mean,
is
the
crazy.
Rain, the blood, it is incredible. It is a really well done transfer. And again, you were talking about earlier with one of your picks about more of a modern release and how well a modern release can look. Not necessarily, modern in terms of present day, but I mean, keep in mind, this is 2013. This is already 11 years ago.
Yeah.
This movie came out, if we think about it, which is fucking mind blowing to think about. I just think this is a perfect blend of kind of taking things in a more modern direction, at least at the time that this movie was released, and at the same time maintaining a lot of the stuff that makes Evil Dead. It was just a really well done movie, really gory, just disgusting, man. Just a gross, hideous fucking movie.
It's one of my favorite movies ever.
Brutal,
crazy.
really well done. And just entertaining, really
Yeah.
entertaining. As far as the special features, they have both the R-rated version and the unrated version, which is cool. This is a new 4K restoration. Now, the restoration is by Sony. Sony themselves did do the restoration.
Interesting. I did not know that actually.
Yep. Sony did the restoration on the release. And they released it via Scream Factory. So Scream Factory had the rights to release it on disc. But you got audio commentary as well with Jane Levy, who's amazing.
She's great.
Lou Taylor and Jessica Lucas, Fede Alvarez, and writer Rodo Sayekas, I believe. There's a commentary by them. They got some special features like behind the scenes stuff, like making of, and then they talk about the reboot. There's a featurette about that. And yeah, just a bunch of they got a theatrical trailer on there, so not a crazy amount of extras, but for a typical Scream Factory release, I think this is one of my favorite releases that they've put out. I mean, it's just one of my favorite remakes, one of my favorite horror movies of that era, of that decade. So that's my pick from Scream Factory, Evil Dead.
And I want to give a content advisory warning for that movie. That right there, probably, other than a pick I've got later on, is probably going to be the least digestible if you aren't into horror. It's a fantastic movie, but I've shown people that movie and they've told me it's the most terrifying movie they've seen. That movie is genuinely terrifying for somebody that's not kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Used to graphic imagery. That movie's terrifying.
My girlfriend refuses to watch this.
Really?
She didn't even watch. She didn't want to watch the new one either. But I mean, this one. So I don't want to get into that. I don't want to go on a whole different rant about that. But I mean, Evil Dead Rise was cool. It was a solid movie. There were things about it that I really liked. The ending kind of threw me off. There was some body horror stuff in there that I was kind of like, just kind of goofy. It didn't fit the Evil Dead universe that I'm used to. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Everything else about it was great. I think this movie is still much nastier than Evil Dead Rise. I think Evil Dead Rise, although Evil Dead Rise has some fucking incredible, like that opening sequence to Evil Dead Rise with the title screen, genius, fucking very creative.
Yeah.
Something really cool that I have not seen in a long time. So shout out to the team behind Evil Dead Rise for coming up with that sequence. That was really cool. Something that's really stood out to me about that movie. But I got to say, man, Evil Dead 2013, it's still up there with Evil Dead 2 for me.
Yeah.
And Evil Dead 2 is more, it's disgusting, it's gory, but it's more slapstick. This movie is just fucking straight. There's no comedy in this.
From the second it starts.
From the second it starts, dude, it is dark. And incredibly unrelenting and unforgiving. So yes, I second that 120%. This is not a movie for the faint of heart. But as far as boutique releases are concerned, I think it's one of the best things that Scream Factory has put out. I think it's one of the most accessible titles that Scream Factory has put out. And again, it's beloved by a lot of horror fans. So that's why I picked it, because it's one of my favorite movies. And I know it's got a lot of love and respect amongst that community. So I think one of the best movies that Scream Factory has on their roster of releases, so to speak. So
yeah, I agree. And I think you've actually got an outlier that I didn't have a pick for. Did you want to go ahead and do that one?
Well, let me see. I have a Synapse film.
I do too.
I have a Second Sight film.
Yep, same.
I have a Vinegar Syndrome film. I have Severin, and I have Blue Underground.
Blue Underground, fire away. I don't have one.
Okay, so Blue Underground. So I think we last mentioned Blue Underground when we talked about our best 4K transfers. I picked the movie Zombie.
Fantastic.
Which is a Lucio Fulci film, which is a fantastic movie. But I wanted to pick a little bit of a different movie. Now, this one's not necessarily, so far, I mean, I had True Romance, I had To Live and Die in L.A., even Evil Dead, as gross as that is, it's still pretty mainstream in regards to a title. Yeah. I think this movie is starting to venture into that realm of slightly lesser known, slightly more, not so obscure, still has a decent following. But that is Blue Underground's release of
So
Maniac
fun.
Cop 2.
Yeah, so fun.
Maniac Cop 2. Yep. And this is starring Robert Davi, who most people will know as one of the, I think one of the Fratelli brothers from the Goonies. I don't know if you guys can see his face there on the left behind Mr.
Mhm.
Maniac Cop. But yeah, dude, the fucking soundtrack to this movie
It's so good.
is amazing. The visuals are incredible with this 4K release. They did such an amazing job. Blue Underground, shout out to them. They do amazing work. They're a label that I don't think, and I said this before in our 4K transfers video, I don't think they get enough credit for the work that they do. We don't hear them talked about as much as, you know, your Arrows and your Second Sights and your Scream Factories, you know, for better or worse. And Criterions of the world. They're just not.
Mhm.
Um,
They do great
that's
work
not
over
to say
there.
that they can hang. That's not to say that their work can hang up there with the rest of those labels. I think they do amazing work. Maniac Cop it's pretty much this cop that's back from the dead and he's roaming the streets of New York City, you know, terrorizing terrorizing the populace, you know.
Mhm.
And we got Robert Davi who plays the guy that's kind of after him, trying to figure out what's going on. So and Robert Zarr, rest in peace, Robert Zarr, who plays the Maniac Cop, probably one of his most signifying roles in terms of his career as the Maniac Cop.
Solid one.
But yeah, it's just a fun 80s action movie. I mean, you call this a horror film as well, but it's one of the best like action horror films, so to speak,
Yeah.
that I think I've seen, and such an entertaining movie. As far
All
as the
three of them are
special
good.
features, it has Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, which is
Mhm.
awesome. And the Dolby Vision again on an OLED TV, it really pops. It does also have DTS HD master audio. I think there's a 5.1 track included as well. I'll get into the extras real quick just because, and again, it's not loaded with extras. We're not on the level of like a Vinegar Syndrome or an Arrow, but
Mhm.
there's enough on here to warrant, you know, checking this out. You know, you have an audio commentary with a director, theatrical trailers. You have an isolated music track, which is cool. Soundtrack on these movies is
Mhm.
fucking, it's a banger. So the fact that they
Hell yeah.
isolated the music track, they know that they know that the soundtrack's awesome. It's like, yeah, let's give them
Yeah.
an isolated track so they can just listen to that. But yeah, William Lustig directed this movie, by the way.
Hell yeah.
So we have some commentary by him, and we also have commentary by everybody's favorite director, Nicholas Winding Refn, famous for films such as Drive, which I love actually.
Hell yeah.
Only God Forgives, Neon Demon. But it's kind of funny that Nicholas Winding Refn is providing commentary tracks for these movies. But I think that's really cool because he's obviously influenced by a lot of this shit. But yeah, they have like a making of featurette, deleted scenes, poster and still gallery, and some trailers, which I think I mentioned. But yeah, Maniac Cop 2, guys, I would highly recommend checking this out. Maybe down the line, dude, we'll do, or I can do a Blue Underground video just to get into some of their other titles. Because again, their
Great
titles
stuff.
are a lot more obscure. They're much more cult and like Euro sleaze type movies that we may have mentioned here and there. But we've never actually done like an extended deep dive or discussion on some of their releases, you know? So, you know, I talked about Zombie. I'm talking about Maniac Cop 2 right now. I highly recommend you should check this out. Zombie's another one, guys. You know, again, if you're a horror fan and you haven't seen Lucio Fulci's Zombie, I mean, I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but check that out. But yeah, consider giving Maniac Cop 2 a chance. I don't know if this is available on streaming, Chase, on Tubi or
I don't think
anywhere
so.
that people could check this out.
The first one is. I know that because
Yeah.
I had to watch it that way. Because fun fact out there, they only put out 2 and 3. There's
Yeah.
no 1 out there anywhere, but it's a
Right.
great trilogy. Really,
Yeah.
really fun. And Bruce Campbell is in the first 2. So
Yes, Bruce
maybe if
Campbell's
there's
in this. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Bruce Campbell is
Yeah.
in the first 2 of these films. He's in Maniac Cop 2.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
Maniac
super
Cop.
fun.
If you can find Maniac Cop, I would obviously watch that one first. But dude, 2 is just as fun.
Yeah.
If not, in some cases, more entertaining. I just love
I
Robert
think it's more
Davi in this,
entertaining.
dude.
Yeah.
I think
He's really
Robert
good.
Davi is one of those actors that I've seen here and there, but as I kind of expand my taste and I get into more of these movies, seeing him pop up in this, it's like, oh, dude, it's fucking like I told you, it's like the dude from the Goonies,
Yeah.
So
It's
there's
gets
a
you
little bit
excited.
of, I guess, nostalgia, that connection there, that makes it a little more exciting to watch him in this. So Maniac Cop 2, that's my pick for Blue Underground.
Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Fantastic pick. I have quite a few Blue Undergrounds. The one I would pick though, actually I don't own anymore. I sold it. And that would be Quiet Days and Clichy. Just
Yes.
5 seconds disclaimer. It's a fun movie, but it's definitely not for everybody. That movie could put you to sleep like it's some sleep aid. But at other points, I think that is one of their crispest restorations. It looked like it was filmed yesterday. But without further ado, we'll go into, because I think it'll be a perfect segue as we're getting a little bit more obscure. I will go with Severin next.
Okay.
I actually picked out 2 titles, and the reason I did is because I'm always going to plug these 2. They're actually these 2 movies would probably break into a top 50 all-time list for me.
Okay.
I'm super happy that they did it, and they're actually 2 movies I had are dearly not here with us today. If you didn't notice, Gabe, I had him watch it for our Versus episodes.
Okay.
So the first one, I think that this speaks the volumes of what they end up putting out. But this is a Dennis Hopper film, and it is called Out of the Blue. Now, to preface, out of anything, even over Evil Dead 2013, this is not an easy watch. But I find that those movies be the most rewarding. This movie reminded me of how it made me feel when I first watched Requiem for a Dream. If you've seen that movie, you can probably kind of correlate how I'm trying to portray the movie. And it's really, 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 really hard for me to kind of say what it's about. It's a coming of age story with a lot of obstacles in your life, and how that molds, forms you, and how you interact with the people around you, how you interact with the environment around you, the cultures around you, society, everything. How the most nuanced things in your day-to-day life and how your upbringing is in that category, how it generally affects you until ultimately shit hits the fan. And it's a beautiful restoration. It's a beautiful film. I don't see how that movie's not talked about more. I get it. It's super uncomfortable. If you want to know how somebody blind watching that movie would make you feel, head on over to the channel and check out one of our more recent Versus episodes between me and Gabe, because I had him watch it and he acknowledged it being a great film. It's just, again, advisory warning that it is very, very, I can't say very enough, extremely uncomfortable.
It'll make you feel it's like it's like Evil Lurks.
Yeah.
Or
That's a
When
great way of
Evil
putting it.
Lurks. Like, it's just one of those movies, you just walk out of it like you just feel defeated.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just
It beats you. And if you like emotional movies, no matter how upset or how it makes you feel, can't recommend that movie enough. If you like rewarding emotional roller coasters, that's probably a movie that you'd love, and you can get it on eBay. It's starting to go up there in prices, but I sold my copy, got it again after I remembered how much I missed it, and it was about $23 for me to get it. That one's actually still sealed because I just got it a couple months ago, and I told him to watch it the other day. Another title I had by Severin, and this speaks to the weirdness I love. And this one, again, isn't digestible, but if you want something a little bit more out there and you want some more art housey filmmaking, then I'm going to recommend Santa Sangre for you.
Hell yeah.
Jodorowsky, one of the most underrated directors of all time. I think even his most popular movie has like an abysmal amount of rate. It's highly rated, but there's just not enough thousands of people that have seen it. I think that's Holy Mountain. It's probably his most popular movie. But I think his entire filmography is great. Currently, he's making biopics about his upcoming in life because he had a weird life, and it shows in his movies. Wonderful dude. But essentially, what this one's about is it's about cults, religions, and how that influences people and how mental illness gets dealt with, right? And a director's vision and how he perceives it. It's a fantastic 4K restoration, just like Out of the Blue. I didn't touch on that enough. That looks very, very, very true to what it would look like. There's parts with heavy grain, but then there's parts where it just looks absurdly clean and out of the blue. And that's the same thing with Santa Sangre. I can't say that about everything Severin does. I don't have everything. I try to keep up with it, but $60 every I think they release like 2 movies a month. It's to be a lot. But Severin does good work. When they hit the ball out of the park, I'd be damned to say that they're not the best in the business, you know?
Yeah.
Because when they hit that ball, they're striking home runs, but sometimes they're only getting to second and third base. But that's no exception for this one. And this LE is actually, I believe, still in production, and you can get it for about $35 on their website on sale during Black Friday deals.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, Santa Sangre.
Yeah, I had that LE and I sold it to somebody. I don't remember who. But it has a new proud owner, hopefully. I forget who it was in the community. I ended up selling that to, but I enjoyed it. I just that was a time where I needed to make some, not only space, but I needed to make some money back because I had to make some budget decisions, and I sold a bunch of stuff off. But that is a fantastic movie. But Out of the Blue, man, I mean, you and I have talked about that.
I love that
and
movie.
It's one of those movies that I recommend to people when talking about, because I'm one of those people that I'm such a fan of Dennis Hopper and almost everything that he's done.
It's great.
I just think he was such a talent. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe I just haven't been talking to the right groups of people, but I never hear people really nobody really talks about Dennis Hopper, at least not in our community.
Yeah, they don't.
I
When he
just
comes up,
haven't.
people say good things, but they don't talk about him enough, you know?
Yeah. That, and again, I'll throw him in that category of, I think, filmmakers, and talents that just haven't really gotten, I guess, more recognition. Not that he hasn't gotten praise, not that he hasn't gotten recognition. I just wish he would get more, because I mean, I really think that movie in particular, it's one of his greatest achievements as an artist.
Yeah.
It's just,
it's crazy.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm thinking of it, and I'm getting emotional thinking about the movie.
It's
so
crazy,
I'm gonna stop
man.
now.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, shout out to Out of the Blue and Dennis Hopper, gone but not forgotten. I just, damn, man.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah, that movie's, but yes.
Yeah.
Definitely
really
approach with caution. Like I said, it's
Yeah.
not a movie for everybody, as you pointed out, and as Gabe stated in his review during the Versus video. So definitely not for everybody, but something worth checking out if you're willing to go down that road.
Yeah.
So the Severin title that I picked, it's a horror film. I mean, some would call it a horror comedy. I think it's a really well done horror comedy, I should say. Dude, the elements of black comedy that are present in this movie are actually really, really well done. And that is, it's a 1974 film by Paul Morrissey, Andy Warhol's Blood for Dracula. Blood for Dracula.
I forgot about that. What a crazy movie, man.
Dude, this movie
is wild.
I'm sorry. And this is a movie that is not for everybody.
Yeah.
But Udo Kier, fantastic performance in this movie, dude. I love Udo Kier in this movie. Dude, I don't think this is one of the first movies at the time that I watched this. This was probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. I watched this. I don't think at the time I had not laughed so much watching a movie. Crazy. Just at the absurdity of it. Especially at the end when I forget who the other actor is. I think it's a gentleman named Joe D'Alessandro, who is another Italian actor. It's just so funny, right? Because all the other, so it's pretty much, I'll get into the plot really quick here. This movie was released in the mid-'70s. It's a 1974 film. Andy Warhol kind of, I guess we could say, sponsored this movie because it was originally released as Andy Warhol's Dracula.
Yeah, it was.
Also known as Blood for Dracula. And Andy Warhol also helped produce a Frankenstein film, which I think Paul Morrissey may have directed as well.
He did. He did both of them. With the same actors, too. Same leads.
I think that's Flesh for Frankenstein.
Yep, courtesy of Vinegar Syndrome, for those that are curious. and you're
Yep.
Googling.
So Blood for Dracula, it pretty much Udo Kier is Count Dracula, who travels to Italy to drink the blood of the virgins of Italy. But
Mhm.
his big problem is that he can't find any virgins because all the girls in Italy are apparently promiscuous and sleeping with everybody, and he's growing more frustrated. And
Mhm.
as he keeps drinking blood of these promiscuous women who are no longer virgins, he's becoming sick and vomiting and like
It's toxic,
reacting
yeah.
violently. Dude, it's the funniest
It's
thing.
comical, yeah.
It is so comical. His performance is so out there. It's funny.
Yeah.
And then you have Joe D'Alessandro, who, okay, so you have Udo Kier. He's got a very heavy accent. So hearing him pronounce his dialogue, and then all the other women in the film, they're just speaking Italian. And then you have Joe D'Alessandro, who sounds like a New York tough guy. Who's
Yeah.
it's like, dude, after he sleeps with a girl, and then he's like, why don't you put your friggin' clothes back on or something like that? Dude, it's like the weirdest fucking movie, dude. It's so
Yeah.
weird. It's so entertaining though. The ending sequence when Joe D'Alessandro's character, and he plays like so there's this rich family in Italy with these like three sisters. And the count is there and he's trying to seduce these women one by one to find out who's a virgin. Um, and you have Joe D'Alessandro. He plays like, I guess you could say he's like the caretaker or like the gardener. He just works on the property. He's like the worker, right? And it's so funny because these women, they're like sleeping with him because he's like the young stud, in the film.
Mhm.
And then like after they sleep with him, they're like mocking him because of his lack of interest in them. Like after, having sexual intercourse.
Mhm.
So it's just the funniest thing. And then meanwhile, you got Udo Kier reacting violently every time he has a sip of these a sip of blood from these women. But the ending is so wildly entertaining and so
Yeah.
funny. You have Joe D'Alessandro's character running around with an axe, pretty much trying to kill Count Dracula. And there's
Mhm.
one moment where he gets his arm chopped off and like he ripped the arm completely gets severed from his body and it's still like grabbing the railing. Like his hand is still clutched onto the railing.
Mhm.
And you have that very comical like Tarantino and like you could tell movies like this influenced directors like Tarantino. There's just that very cartoonish looking blood that's just spraying out of the severed limbs. It's just very violent, but again, not very realistic, incredibly over the top, incredibly comical. As I said, the black humor in this film uh is just really great. And as far as the packaging is concerned, I don't know if
It's
this limited edition is still available. This is probably available in a standard edition, folks, if you want to pick this up. Um but it's kind of cool because Severin, they do this thing where they release the UHD feature on disc 1. There's a Blu-ray feature on disc 2, and disc 3 is a soundtrack, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. So if you're somebody into soundtracks, I mentioned it with Maniac Cop. They had that isolated audio track on that Blue Underground release. They do a soundtrack with this one, which is pretty cool. So,
Hell yeah.
and dude, there's almost, I'm not going to go through them all because there's too many, but there's almost 4 hours of special features on this,
There's a lot.
which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But
Severin's
and as
pretty
far
good
as
at that.
yeah, and I will say, so here's the thing, man. People check that out. That's pretty cool. Get that little lobby
Yeah.
card in there. I will say this about Severin, man. I don't buy all of their releases,
It's too
but I was
expensive,
very
man.
impressed with this. Dude, yeah,
Yeah.
I was very impressed with this. And that's the thing, man. That's the one thing. If anybody from Severin is listening to this, please figure out a way to make your damn releases cheaper because I
Yeah.
love the work that they do.
Yeah.
I just wish it was a little more within a reasonable range. And I'm not going to say
Yeah.
that these movies are not worth seeking out. They're not worth watching. They definitely
Yeah.
are. I was very
Good work
impressed
too.
with their Cemetery Man 4K release. I love that. I'll probably try to watch that again and do a review of that at some point down the road. They do really good work. I just wish that they were a little more affordable.
Yeah, I agree.
So, a little bit of constructive criticism there for Severin, but they do like you said, when they do it, they hit it out of the park. They really do. So,
Yeah.
Blood for Dracula, I'd highly recommend checking that out. If you're able to find that. Like I said, I don't know about the LE being in stock, but the standard edition is definitely still out there. You can most definitely pick that up online. So that's
Yeah.
my pick.
Fantastic pick. And it's a great segue because I consider this next company almost, they're not affiliated. I know they've done work together before. Just like they released Blood for Dracula, and then Vinegar Syndrome released Flesh for Frankenstein the same exact month. It was one of their
Yeah.
earlier 4Ks for both companies, almost 3 years ago at this point. It's been around for a while, except they did the 3D for on Blu-ray with Vinegar Syndrome. But I look at them the same. I just look at them as a cheaper Severin that does the
Right.
same exact quality work.
Yeah.
So segueing into it, and this is something because I know that is one of the few titles I do know that you picked, is something I forgot because I have it upstairs, not on my actual shelf. So I ended up settling with this one instead of going upstairs because Will and I actually did a review for this one. Now, the movie itself might not be for everybody. It's not a perfect 10 out of 10. It's not a masterpiece. But again, just like Severin, I mean, Vinegar Syndrome has started to get a little bit more mainstream, but not really. They'll have a 1 or 2 releases a year where people go like, oh, Roadhouse, oh, Showgirls. That was their last year's, and then 2 years ago it was Roadhouse.
Yeah.
This one right here for Existence, which we did a review of this entire thing, so I won't show everything about it. This
check
is
that
the
out,
complete
guys. That's on our
package.
channel too. Yeah.
Yeah, and we broke it down. We showed everything.
Yeah.
We go to extreme detail, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because we talked about it almost like 30 minutes because it was such a fantastic release. It has so many special features on it. I want to say it has at least 3 or 4 hours on there. Yeah, it's got a lot, including audio commentary. The restoration looks good. I do believe this was shot digitally, not on film. So again, another great upscale that they managed to do on their end as well. But also, it was their first kind of Arrow style full slip. I'm hard pressed to find any on my shelf. I have most of Vinegar Syndrome's releases outside of this year, but it's a testament to how good of work they do. And this was like what, $35, and that's
It was
great.
Yeah, it was around 35, 40 with the shipping or something like that.
Yeah.
Granted, you didn't get anything else in your cart, But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, fantastic work by them.
And that release, that they did numbers with that, from what I remember.
Outside of the Sadness, which just I'm assuming destroyed that record. That was crazy, but that's
4 hours, less than 4 hours, it was sold out.
And I literally decided just to not purchase it at that moment and missed out on it.
Yeah.
But Vinegar Syndrome, fantastic company. Now, not everything's for everybody. Vinegar Syndrome is one of those companies that does have that reputation where it's like, ugh, I don't think that's warranted because I've blind bought a lot of their movies. Now, of course, I'm a horror connoisseur, a thriller connoisseur, a grotesque connoisseur to a degree. So I seek out things that Severin and Vinegar Syndrome tend to put out. I'm always seeing what they're announcing and putting out there. I would say that they've gotten a lot better. They have a new Cinematograph label. What's the other one that they just came out with? There's their Cinematograph. Oh, VSU, which is definitely like they just came out with Navy SEALs, which is a very, very popular movie from its time.
Yeah.
That's got Martin Sheen or Charlie Sheen. I'm pretty sure Charlie Sheen, right?
Charlie Sheen, but they just came out with Invasion USA, which is a Chuck Norris film, which a lot of people lost their minds over.
Yeah.
So that's available on their halfway to Black Friday sale. I'm pretty sure they revealed Invasion USA, which is going to be, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Invasion USA is their next VSU.
Yes, it is.
And Invasion USA is just a fucking dude. That's just a fucking wild movie. That's a fun Chuck Norris movie, dude. So
yeah.
They might be on a Chuck Norris kick, Vinegar Syndrome, because with Sidekicks and now Invasion USA. So I'm wondering what they're going to be doing down the line. It kind of makes you curious, but yeah, dude. We've done kind of we did like a Vinegar Syndrome year in review video that's available on the channel. Chase and I, we sat there and we kind of went through the year, and our big question was whether or not, Vinegar Syndrome had lived up to the hype that they had going into the previous year, or transitioning into the new year, right? Because they had those big releases like Roadhouse that we talked about, and there was a lot of hype behind them as to whether or not they were going to be able to step up and maybe compete with some of the studio releases, right? So, or even labels like Scream Factory, Shout Factory, which has gotten a lot of criticism as of late, but we do have a video up if anybody wants to check that out. We do a year in review. We talk about all the titles that were released. I think it was for 2023, and whether or not they kind of piqued our interest or not, which ones we picked up, which ones we didn't. So there's a whole video on there for you guys to check out if you want. That's on the channel. So check that out if you're interested. Do you have anything else to say about your pick, Chase? Because otherwise I'll kind of talk about my pick quick, and then we'll move on to our next label.
Fire away.
So I picked a movie that I think a lot of people were excited about, but you and I in particular, amongst each other, we were raving about the fact that this was coming out. And that is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Let's go.
Texas
I got mine
Chainsaw
signed by
Massacre
Miss
2.
Caroline. Hold on, let me go grab mine.
Go get yours.
I have to show that off every single time I get the fucking chance, bro.
Okay, yeah, go get yours. So I'll kind of just talk about it while Chase is going to get his copy. But again, this is another film with the lovely Caroline Williams and Dennis Hopper, one of my heroes we just talked about moments ago. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, this is one of those movies that when Vinegar Syndrome announced this, people went wild. Like, people lost their minds. It's like, damn, okay, they're stepping up, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, the first one, Texas Chainsaw Massacre being an absolute classic, I don't think we really need to go into that. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, in its own right, in my opinion, is considered to be a cult classic film. Again, a little less serious, but what's interesting about this movie is that the black humor is much more prevalent. It's much more not so much in your face, but it's much easier to read on screen than it was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And that was one of Hooper's biggest, I guess, things about it, is that he's like, I was making a comedy, trying to, infuse some comedy into it. And with Texas Chainsaw, like, the comedy is there. It's just so subtle that it can be hard to notice right away unless you're really paying attention. So with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, that's much more prevalent. It's much more. Damn, he's got the lovely Caroline Williams signature on there, and that beautiful blue.
God, it's just so perfect, man.
It's so, dude, it looks so crisp.
Yeah.
So Chase, I was just kind of going on a little while you were gone. I was just talking about how Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, why people like it so much and why it's
so goofy,
so beloved in its own right. It's a lot goofier, I guess, in some regards. Maybe goofier isn't the right word. I was talking about how Tobe Hooper, and I think we may have talked about this before. In fact, I don't know if it was mentioned during the Alan Danziger interview that we did, but with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with the original film, there were elements of comedy in there that Hooper wanted to convey. It's just that
bring more prevalent. Yeah.
The film was so shocking that a lot of that stuff was overlooked completely. Yeah. Just people didn't notice it because they were so horrified as to what was going on, right, on screen.
Yeah.
And that was one of his biggest takeaways, was like, damn, I'm surprised that more people couldn't recognize or didn't understand, some of the small moments, as subtle as they were, of comedy that I tried to kind of lace throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And so I think Texas Chainsaw 2 was the answer to that. Where that comedy, although it's dark, it's much more pervasive, so to speak. It's much easier. It's much more easier to notice, right? It's in your face more so.
Especially with
and again, I don't think in your face is the right way to describe it, but it's not as overshadowed by everything else. But
and the legend we were just talking about himself, Mr. Dennis Hopper.
Yep. But this is just an excellent package. And again, guys, this is available in a standard edition. I don't know if there's any of these left.
Yeah.
Still
no more slips. Way past sold out for sure.
way past sold out. Well, there you go, folks. But if you can find a standard edition of this, it's worth picking up for the transfer alone. I think they did excellent work with the transfer. The bonus features are loaded. Chase was just saying Vinegar Syndrome, they really go above and beyond with the bonus features. I mean, there's hours of bonus features on this.
There is.
It's a 4K Ultra HD release. It's got HDR. It doesn't have Dolby Atmos, but it's got the DTS HD master audio. I'm pretty sure that's 5.1. Loads of special features, guys. Loads of special features. So another essential release, I think. If you're going to buy something from Vinegar Syndrome, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is a good start. And again, we're going with a lot of. It seems like we're doing a lot of horror titles here. So, but these are just what we happen to have picked. So, that's my pick for Vinegar Syndrome.
And then shout out, Will. I don't know if I told you this, but I don't know why his name escapes me. Bill Johnson. I get to meet him in about a month to get
hell yeah, dude.
One more signature on here. I'm gonna have him sign it with yellow this time. So
there you go. That'd be dope. Yeah,
right underneath
that'd be dope.
The logo. So
dude, soon you're gonna have the most coveted copy of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2,
right.
like in the country. You're gonna have all the signatures on it.
Yeah, and then I plan on finishing out my second site. Which what a great segue, am I right? To what is actually. Vinegar Syndrome's up there. I always try to talk myself into saying that Vinegar Syndrome's my favorite out there in the boutique world, but it's really hard not to say Second Sight is. It really, really is hard not to. Their packaging, unparalleled. Dollar for dollar, their special features. They even make their own little mini documentaries for these things sometimes. And I decided not to get my highly coveted Texas Chainsaw Massacre copy. And the reason is, while it is a difference slightly between, I believe it's Gunpowder and Sky did theirs for the US release, but they used the Turbine one from about 5-6 years ago.
Yep.
Fantastic release. I don't find it night and day different enough for me to claim it's their best work, even though it has the Shocking Truth documentary. It's loaded with special features. I would crown their jewel as The Witch.
There you go.
Fantastic movie. Absolutely phenomenal restoration in absolutely every which way. If you are lucky enough, because owning any form of physical media is being fortunate in that degree, the Lionsgate release is not the best. It's extremely yellow, yellow. And especially having that HDR on there, it makes it worse. It's kind of like Evil Dead 1. If you have a copy of Evil Dead 1 in your on your shelf, it's very yellow. And that's kind of how The Witch is. And it wasn't meant to look that way. That was actually my first time ever watching the movie, was through the Lionsgate copy. So I was fortunate enough to get this from a member of our server about 2-3 months ago, because I missed out on getting the LE, and they knew I was a Second Sight connoisseur. And I can sit here and tell you it is an absolutely astronomical night and day difference. It is a restoration approved by Mr. Eggers himself. It is a 5.1 audio track with HDR10, and it is loaded to the absolute brim with special features. It has at least 4 hours of special features on there, including audio commentary. And it's got about a 30-minute Q&A with Robert Eggers himself. It's essential to own. And of course, this specific one I'm holding in my hands, outside of their Drive LE that they did, which might even plummet in value eventually, because we're getting the Sony Steelbook soon.
Yeah, you're getting that Steelbook. I still think that Second Sight set will be worth. I still think it'll be worth some decent money. I mean,
I think so. I just don't think 500 like I've seen it going for.
Oh, no, of course not. No.
Just like this has been going for anywhere from 180 to $300. I wouldn't pay that, but you can get just the disc in here for in the Amaray for 28 imported off Orbit, Atomic, whatever the case may be. But absolutely phenomenal work by Second Sight. I just think they don't release a lot. They usually have about one release every 3 months, except this last go around they dropped 2 titles at once. Their next one is actually a South Korean film that I hear good things about. It's like A Beautiful Darkness or something like that. I'm excited for it, but when they do drop, the wait is worth it, and especially the price. Importing these, like whenever this came out, probably was about $58. I think it's worth it to do that for any movie that you value. So The
Yeah.
Witch, phenomenal movie. If you haven't seen it, it's not too terrifying. It's an absolutely amazing folk horror movie, though. I would even possibly categorize it a little bit more as thriller than horror. It could be terrifying to the right person, but I would
Yeah,
definitely say
it's
it's a little bit more of a
definitely
thriller.
it's more like folk horror, but it's definitely
Yeah,
more brooding than it
yeah,
is like straightforward horror. I think the
very slow.
best thing about The Witch, it is a slow burn movie, but it is well worth the watch. I mean, if you want to pop this in like a nice autumn afternoon in late September and October, when summer's over, and you want to get yourself in the vibe of Halloween or just that
Hmm.
season, I think this is a perfect movie. It's just the atmosphere in this movie is incredibly well established from the start.
Yeah,
Uh, and I don't want to, not to. Oh, shout out to Robert Eggers, but it's why I'm so looking forward to Nosferatu,
so
because
excited.
if he can do, I just imagine what he can do with remaking Nosferatu in terms of the way it's going to be shot, the way it's going to be lit. If this film, if The Witch is any indication to what he's able to do with Nosferatu, then I'm excited, because I think The Witch, it's one of the first movies that I saw in a long time where I said, "Wow, like, dude, you don't need dialogue in this movie.
Yeah, no,
You didn't in the dialogue. The
very
dialogue
subtle.
is unique as well because they worked very hard to get that dialogue to sound unique and reflective of how people spoke
Hmm.
in that time period. So that was a whole thing in itself, is getting the dialogue to sound and getting the characters and the actors to speak the way that they did with each other. But I mean, dude, the atmosphere and the dread, the sense of dread and impending dread in this movie is so well done that it's like you don't even need dialogue to be uncomfortable, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's a feat in itself. But yeah, dude, I think The Witch is one of the best transfers that Second Sight has put out. It was one of the first ones that made me aware of Second Sight as a label. When I was getting back into 4Ks, and I think that was right around the time. When was this released? Was this 2020 or 2021?
The
Um,
second site release,
yeah, was
it was
it
2023.
2021? It was
It was last year.
2023.
Yeah, it was last year.
No
It
way,
was
dude.
around March of last year. Yeah. Feels like
What,
2020,
dude?
2021 though.
It feels like it was way sooner, dude.
Yeah.
That's
The second site release, it's I want to say their first 4K was Drive, and that came out in 2021, 2022.
yeah.
And this was last year's because it was huge. Excuse me. It was huge whenever they announced
Mm,
that. It was a really, really, really big deal because a lot of people did have complaints about the Lionsgate disc because of the yellow tint to it.
right. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know it was last year. I thought it was 2022.
It could have been the tail end
Um,
of 2022, but I swear it was March 23.
okay. But either way, it's worth checking out. And
Yeah.
guys, we should also mention too, a lot of like most of these editions we have were like day one pre-orders, or we
Yeah.
tried to get them as soon as we could. So Chase and I do have a lot of the limited editions, but again, man, this video is about just owning these films regardless of the edition. So if you guys can
Yeah.
find these movies for a standard edition and save yourselves a lot of money, we obviously both encourage that. If you watch these movies and you really enjoy them and there's something that you want to go for that beefy edition, you want to try to find some of those limited editions, although some of them might be out of print, then by all means go for it, dude, if that makes you happy too. But yeah, The Witch, highly recommended. One
Yeah.
of their best releases, I think. But Second Sight, dude, they really do not do any wrong. I mean, most of
They
their
don't.
work
Yeah.
is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed. What'd you choose?
my pick is pretty well known. In fact, I don't know. I think I got this right after I got The Witch.
Interesting.
And I got this from Orbit DVD. So shout out to Orbit DVD. But it is Second Sight's version of George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead.
Hell yeah.
I mean, dude, as far
Great
as the
work.
movie's concerned, there's not much else I can say about this movie. It's considered to be George A. Romero's masterpiece. I mean, what else are we going to say about this? One of the best zombie movies of all time. This is most people's favorite in the Dead trilogy, or that original trilogy, so to speak, Night,
Yeah.
Dawn, and Day. I will say, I personally am a fan of Day of the Dead. I like Day of the Dead a little more than I like Dawn of the Dead. Personally speaking, I just think Day of the Dead has much. It's a little more bleak, and I kind of like that about Day of the Dead. I also really like the soundtrack of Day of the Dead a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a little bit more there for me to digest personally when it comes down to these two films, or the three films. I love Night of the Living Dead. I love them all. But dude, this transfer, man, they fucking killed it with this.
They did.
And this is why Second Sight, this is why they are what they are. I mean, as far as a label's concerned, I mean, look at this. Look at this
Yeah.
packaging, dude.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay. You don't get this from every label.
And that was a hard to find movie for the longest time. That set kept going in and out of stock like crazy.
Yep. And
Which I believe
there's,
the standard
there's,
you can still get.
there's 3 cuts of this movie
Yeah.
on here. Oh, dude, I'm missing a disc. I wonder what happened to that disc.
Maybe it's sitting on top of your player.
No, I have no idea, but I'm missing a disc. Uh-oh. That's not good. I got to figure out what happened there. Where'd the disc go? That's a concern, man.
That
I don't know when
is.
the last time, dude, I watched this like well over a year and a half ago.
You know, sometimes there's been times like whenever I have something sitting on my player, like a TV series or something like that. Like I have Andor
Yeah.
going on right now, and I have the Steelbook on my shelf, so that way it's not taking up real estate in the stack and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I put it in the box for what I'm, you know what I mean. So I set
Mm.
Andor in the box. Like let's say I take out Texas Chainsaw 2. I take
Yeah.
Andor out, put it in there, put it back in afterwards. But there's been times I've
Okay.
seen myself like putting it over the disc.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah.
know? So who
Well-
knows? There could be lost movies. Dude, I thought I lost Wizard
Dude,
of Oz.
I
for
hope
2
it's
years
not
and found
lost
it.
because,
It was in a game
I
case.
got the Argento cut, and then like the extended cut, and then I think I have the original. The theatrical cut is what, dude. I'm wondering if it's in my other Blu-ray 4K player.
You probably
'Cause I
you
got
did
the,
get the 820 about a year ago now, right?
I got the 820 a year ago, so dude, I wonder if it's still sitting
Yeah.
in my Sony
Maybe.
Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Dude, wouldn't that be funny?
Yeah.
Anyway,
It probably is.
but yeah, this, I mean, dude, this is it's a 4K scan of the theatrical cut, the original camera negative, and a 4K scan of the extended cut color reversal internegative. DTS HD master audio mono 1.0. It's presented in HDR 10 plus. You got commentary by Richard P. Rubenstein, optional English subtitles. That's for the extended cut. For the theatrical cut, they have again scanned from the original camera negative. And guys, Second Sight does all their work in house. If we haven't said it already, they are legit. Like they do most of the work on these restorations. Either based in New York or based in London. Those are their two, I guess we could say, headquarters, so to speak. They do have a
Oh, do they
US
really?
Yeah, they have one in New York.
They need to stop charging me such a high import tax then.
Yeah,
Figure
so
out how
the
to
company,
get-
no, they
Yeah.
just do some of the restoration work there. So there's a company they use
Oh,
called
okay.
Final Frame,
Oh, okay.
which it's based in New York.
Oh,
But most
okay.
of the work they do is in London.
Right on.
But again, this scan, obviously seeing that, the legendary George A. Romero isn't with us, this has been approved officially by the director of photography, Michael Gornick. So you have a new restoration of the original optical track negative, and that's presented in the DTS HD master audio, both mono 1.0, stereo 2.0, and surround 5.1. So you have all those options available. Commentary by George A. Romero, Tom Savini, Christine Forrest. New commentary by Travis Crawford. And dude, loads of special features. There's some new stuff on here. Zombies and Bikers with John Amplis. Raising the Dead. That's a new special feature. They got some other stuff with Tom Savini about the special effects makeup and how they did all of that. I mean, a lot of cool stuff, dude. And
yeah.
For somebody like me, we talk about this before. I love watching this kind of stuff. I love the behind the scenes stuff because you learn a lot about how some of this stuff comes together. But I mean, dude, what else can be said about Dawn of the Dead? It's one of the greatest horror films of all time. We're not going to go down that path right now and just talk about how great it is. But yeah, I think a fantastic release by Second Sight and one that really put them on the map along with The Witch.
Yeah, fantastic pick. And we have only one more, which I won't really spend next to any time on this one because I have talked about this at least every other episode. Yeah. Our last one is Synapse, another one that fits in the same category as Blue Underground, Second Sight, where they have immense quality and they don't release too often. They release at least every 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
But that's going to be something, and it's well known in the community. I think outside of an Arrow title, I think this movie is typically what gets recommended the most to most people. And I've seen people like myself. It was my first time buying it. It's just people kept shoving it down my throat, and I was like, okay, I'll get it, And I did finally buy Suspiria by Synapse from 1977. I don't know why I'm lapsing on saying that, but absolutely phenomenal movie. It's literally top 5 transfers out there. The audio, the Atmos is insane. The special features list is intense. Like, if I can zoom in, that's all that fine print right there. It's a lot. I think this is out there, and especially being a non-limited edition, which I would definitely rebuy if so. But this right here is one of the ultimate packages. Every penny that you're paying for, you're getting one of the best things that you can get on physical media right now. Synapse does not miss. Every single Synapse release that I have is absolutely insane. From Demons 1 and 2 to Blood Feast to this to, I believe it's called The Covenant. I had to go double check. It's Covenant. They did absolutely stellar work. Even if you're just in a mood, like this would fall in that category if you're a reference hunter, I'd like to say, or you're more or less buying movies for technical merit. Even if you're not a horror fan, get this. If you're a horror fan, get this. If you're a Giallo fan, if that's a category that you're into, this isn't necessarily Giallo, but still get this. This is a good foray into that gate of a genre that has really gotten a second wind thanks to places like Arrow, thanks to people like Severin and Vinegar Syndrome. Suspiria is probably the best disc on the market, and it's up there with 2001. And I talked about it pretty much in length on our Best 4Ks episode, so it might sound familiar to you.
Cool. Well, my pick is very similar in vein to yours, seeing as it's not only the same director, it is the same label. It's another Synapse release, and it's in the same genre. Well, not necessarily the same genre. Mine is more of a straightforward giallo film.
Yeah,
but it's one of my favorite giallo films of all time, and it's probably my favorite Dario Argento film, more so than Suspiria and all his other films. I just love. I love this movie. I think it's an excellent film. It's one that I recommend to people who are fans of slasher movies. I mean, there's so many amazing kills in this movie. So many great blood effects and just the special effects involved in the special effects makeup with the kills is I don't know. I just love it, dude. And that is Dario Argento's Tenebrae. So I got the Ellie edition here. This is available in a standard, but we got the classic poster art right there. And they had 2 versions of this originally. They had this version, and they had another version where it's a scene from the film where one of the other women that gets killed, she has like a knife being shoved into her neck. Yeah, or held up as he's covering her mouth with like a cloth or something. So I'm pretty sure, or stuffing paper in her mouth. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's the other version that they released, which is kind of cool. But I went with the classic look, man, because you can't go wrong with this. And there's just something so creepy about this image.
So good.
Dario Argento, I acknowledge his talent as a visualist. When it comes to storytelling in some of his movies, he's not the best.
Yeah.
And I've always maintained that criticism of him, although I do appreciate like movies like Suspiria. I think Suspiria and Tenebrae are some of his most cohesive films, other than some of the earlier films he did,
Like Deep
like
Red was
Bird with
really
the
good.
Deep Red, the
Bird with the
two
Crystal Plumage and
Bird with the Crystal
Cat o' Nine
Plumage and the
Tails.
Cat O' Nine Tails.
Yeah.
Those two movies, particularly Crystal Plumage and Cat O' Nine Tails, those are much better written. I think those overall
Yeah.
are more cohesive.
Very detective-y.
But exactly.
Yeah.
And I tend to like that stuff a little more.
Mhm.
And you get some of that in here. But Tenebrae is just a classic giallo, man. I mean, you really cannot go wrong with this movie. And again, this is not for everybody, but if you're looking to get into boutique labels and you're a fan of traditional North American slasher films of the 80s, and even stuff like Scream, from the 90s, there's a lot of stuff in Tenebrae that inspired some of those movies.
Hell yeah.
And this is a movie that was released in the early 80s. I mean, this was 1982. So, we were having, Friday the 13th was coming out here by that time, riding off the coattails of movies like Halloween. And over in Italy, they were getting Tenebrae, which I think it was just so interesting that while we were getting that kind of stuff over here, they were getting this stuff in Italy. And this movie is just amazing. It's a classic giallo. I mean, as far as the plot's concerned, the first thing I want to point out is the title. Tenebrae in Italian is supposedly translates to darkness. So I found that to be interesting. And I was also doing a little bit of research, and it's also interesting because the Tenebrae is also, I guess, it's a festival or some kind of religious service in Western Christianity, and it's held, I guess, in the week or days that come before Easter. And it's interesting because it's characterized by a subsequent extinguishing of candles. So one by one, there's candles that are extinguished. So I thought that was kind of cool. So maybe there's a double meaning to this title. It means darkness because it ends in darkness. When the last candle is extinguished, there's nothing but darkness remains. And it's just kind of funny because with giallo films and with slashers, they're picked off one by one, just like you would go and extinguish a candle one by one. So I was looking that up the other day, and I found that a little interesting. But it pretty much centers around an American writer who writes these violent crime novels. He visits Italy to promote his book, and suddenly, all the women around him start these women are just, the beautiful women are being killed one by one in these really gruesome ways. So a typical giallo plot, and then you have your kind of detective involved that's kind of trying to figure out who's behind all of it, right? So the thing that separates this, I think, from a lot of movies of that time period, I think Argento, he's at the top of his game here. There's some really cheesy dialogue in this movie, which I love. It just makes it that much more enjoyable. Like some really, I guess we can say there's some dialogue that's in very poor taste. I'll just be completely honest, but it just sounds so ridiculous with the dubbing that you cannot help but laugh. So I recommend watching this not only with subtitles, but also watch the dubbed version, because if you want a real enjoyable time and maybe a less serious viewing of this movie, watch it with the dub because it is hilarious. But dude, the kills in this are extraordinary. Some of the best kills I think we've seen in a giallo film. And I've mentioned movies like Blood and Black Lace, which is another one of my favorite movies of that genre, by Mario Bava. But I think Tenebrae is up there with one of my, it's in my top 5 giallo movies of all time. And there's a lot of giallo films, folks. There's so many of them.
So good though.
Giallo is essentially like the Italian version of it's kind of like in Italy to a degree what slasher films were in the United States.
Yeah.
Where the genre exploded to such an extent in the 80s in Italy that, you know, you had your top tier giallos like Tenebrae, you know, Suspiria to an extent, movies of that caliber. And then you just had your really more low budget, much more sleazy, much more gritty versions of giallos that were coming out, just like we had with slashers in North America. So my pick is Tenebrae. I highly recommend you guys try to check this out. One of Argento's best movies if you're a fan of Argento. And again, much more of a straightforward giallo from him, which I think I like because it's much more simplistic in that regard. Where like with Suspiria, you have a bit of that dream logic in there.
Yeah.
There's more of a lapse in that storytelling, right? It's much more of it's more of a suspension of disbelief that you have to bring to a movie like Suspiria, whereas with Tenebrae, it's pretty much more straightforward. Like it's just a killer going around murdering these people. So in that regard, it's a little more digestible. But yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. I highly recommend it. Check it out.
Hell
Look for
yeah.
the standard edition. It's most likely available.
Yeah, they just re-released that with
So-
Slip only like 5 months ago, maybe
Yeah.
around Christmas.
Yeah, so that's the thing. And Synapse is cool. I think they're actually doing it with Demons. They're going to do Demons 1 and 2 as separate
Yeah.
slips, which is cool. So if you guys missed out, if anybody's listening or watching this who happened to have missed out on the Demons, the double pack that they did, there was one release, one slip, but it had both movies. They're going to do a re-release of those separately,
yeah.
each with their own slip cover. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, guys, those are our picks. Chase, do you have any closing thoughts before we call it a day here? Call it a night for that matter.
Yeah, right. No, I think we hit a lot, and it's like Will said, like, yeah, there was a lot of horror, a lot of giallo, a lot of thrillers in this, but that's also what a lot of boutiques put out. You know, it's cheaper for them to acquire, it's cheaper for them to restore. Sometimes it's almost free, like Vinegar Syndrome, for instance, on the Lost Picture Show, the Lost Picture Show. They go into detail about how there's just times they just get things and they're in horrible condition. It costs them nothing other than the cost to restore it. So horror is very prevalent in numbers. So it's very hard to avoid horror, even being horror fanboys. But yeah, it's why I threw something in there like out of the blue. These places, you know, you're not going to get Severin releasing Scream 4. You know, that's why we haven't gotten Scream 4 on Steelbook yet, because Severin's doing it. It just doesn't happen. It can happen, but the cost to acquire that, it's just much better for somebody like that one was Universal, wasn't it? 4.
Which one? 4?
Scream 4.
Yeah, I don't.
It was somebody different. Yeah,
I think so, but yeah, it was someone different than the norm.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just cheaper for them to do it themselves. You know, Scream Factory, just like we talked about with Evil Dead 2013, Sony did the restoration. They probably approached them, and that was almost, you know, free royalties for Scream Factory's part and Sony's part, right? So
Yeah.
there's just so much nuances that go into this that a lot of people don't think about, but that's why horror's so prevalent. And especially with the 70s, 80s, and 60s, 90s booms, that 40-year boom of horror, it's very easy to find a lot of titles. So that's why it was very heavy in that department. But otherwise, I think we got a lot of really good recommendations. Hopefully, some things that maybe you guys have heard of for the first
Yeah.
time, and definitely some things you guys have heard of numerous times from me specifically.
And keep in mind, we tried to, because that's the other thing, like to piggyback off of what you said, Chase, if I may, real quick here, like
Yeah.
films like To Live and Die in LA, Kino is one label that I think we should mention. And Criterion, we didn't really talk about Criterion in this episode. Well, maybe we'll in a future
Yeah.
release or a future episode, we'll have some of their picks in there. We really wanted to focus on some of the boutique labels that we think are the talk of the town right now. I mean, Arrow's getting a lot of love from the community. Vinegar Syndrome's up there. You know, Scream Factory, Shout Factory, love them or hate them. You know, they have people that admire what they do. They have people that you know, have things to say on the other end of the
Right.
spectrum in regards to, you know, how they've handled things in the last couple of years. But you know, there's still so many other labels that we got to talk about. I mean, 88 Films, for example, Eureka Entertainment,
Black
Error
Cauldron.
444 I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. There's a lot of stuff. Unearthed Films. There's a lot of other labels out there that we have yet to touch on. So we wanted to kind of talk about movies that were a little more accessible to kind of start things off, dip our toe in the water, so to speak. You know, you don't want to alienate people too much with like crazy movies, obscure titles that no one's ever heard of, or for that matter, interested in. But yeah, it's tough. Like, I think it's refreshing that like that's when Arrow releases something like True Romance or The Warriors, for example. It's like, oh, cool. It's not just another horror movie, you know. And that's the thing. I mean, that makes us more excited when we can pick a movie that isn't necessarily stuck in the horror genre or a subgenre of horror. It's always more enjoyable to kind of throw it out on the list because, yeah, boutique labels, they tend to be pretty horror, sci-fi / exploitation heavy. So,
Very much
you
so.
know, yeah, I mean, we're going to have future installments. It sounds like, you know, I had a lot of fun. You
Yeah,
know, I
I
don't
did
know
too.
about you, but
Yeah, a
we'll
lot.
try to do what we can to keep things as diversified as possible moving forward, you know, just to keep things fresh and keep things interesting and not kind of stick within one genre, you know, to the best of our capability for that matter. So,
Yeah.
yeah, guys, that was it. Thanks for checking out the podcast and stay tuned. We got a lot more content coming. We mentioned some other videos. Check those out as well. Check out Chase's reviews for the movies he talked about and people that are interested in Vinegar Syndrome. We have a Vinegar Syndrome video year in review for 2023 that we put out a little while ago. You guys should go revisit that. You know, definitely go back, watch some of our older content. You know, there's a bunch of stuff there that's kind of, you know, gets buried as time goes on that that even we forget that we've done. So,
Right.
yeah, check
Yeah.
that out. And as always, thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, support the channel. We appreciate everybody that tunes in, and comment down below. You know, let us know if you guys are interested in any of these titles, if you own any of them already, if there's anything you're interested in picking up. You know, we always love feedback. So thank you guys again.
Appreciate everybody. Have a wonderful day.